Welcome to Travel Buddy, presented by Switchfly. In this podcast, we talk about all things travel, rewards, and loyalty. Let's get to it. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Travel Buddy podcast, presented by Switchfly. I have with me, as always, the beautiful, the inimitable Ian Andersen. Ian, welcome. We have also the lovely Rachel Satow, as always. Thank you for joining. Today, we are going to be talking about aligning rewards programs with team goals and KPIs. So as we are all entering the final stretches of 2025, we are setting our sights on 2026 because we are this close to Thanksgiving, and I can't believe the year's almost over. But we are heading into 2026, and everybody wants to know, how can I get my rewards and recognition program, these benefits programs that I have, the loyalty programs that I have, how can I get this to match my business objectives? I need to drive revenue. I need to get my team more engaged, more productivity, more innovation. 2026 is going to be a banger year. I'm stoked about it. And my rewards and recognition program is going to be a part of that. So how do we get these things to align? So we have a couple of segments here that are going to be great for the show. The first is, what is the problem with traditional rewards programs? So Rachel, I will start with you. Tell us, there's traditional programs out there that are great, but there's major downsides to them. And there's, of course, alternative programs that include travel that we'll talk about in a bit. But kick us off and tell us a little bit of the challenges that you might face with a traditional program.
Yeah, so, it's hard to say that we ever get outside of like a traditional program, right? I feel like traditional programs just expand their offerings and expand their rewards, and that's kind of how they become this next gen version of themselves. But I think the greatest way to say this is that generic programs will lead to generic outcomes. Rewards that have no tie to what actually drives business results means that you are potentially rewarding behavior that is undesirable or is not something that is actually going to move the needle for you. So one of the things that we typically see, and this is just, it's almost unavoidable in some cases, but recognition is often retroactive or ceremonial. So like tenure or anniversaries, that's typically when you start to see those recognition calls. But it doesn't mean, what that means is that they're not being proactive or strategic in how they can leverage these rewards programs and really use it as a strategic lever to increase productivity and reach business strategy and goals. So these programs are often rewarding the visibility or the things that are most tangible rather than true impact.
Yeah, I like the way you framed that. I was just reading a thing this morning about Charlie Munger. He's the famed right-hand man of Warren Buffett at Berkshire Hathaway. And the quote that I saw was, never think about anything else when you can think about as incentives. And so to motivate people to build this kind of culture that you want, the innovation, the productivity that you're really looking for, you have to motivate them through incentives. You have to be thinking about it at the front end before they start working, because then they are driven to work and perform, based on those incentives that you structure. But if you only reward for, hey, you've been here 5 years or 10 years, great, we're excited, or it's the end of the year, here's a reward, you've already missed all the incentive and motivation that you could have up front.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great call out. Teams are going to engage in what you incentivize, not what you're hoping for. So if your rewards aren't tied to KPIs, teams are going to spend their energy on guessing on what matters instead of on focusing what metrics the business actually cares about.
That's right. Thank you, Charlie Munger, legend. Rest in peace. So moving on. So how do you align these things going forward? So how do you set up incentive structures or these kind of rewards and recognition, these kind of motivating behaviors to build that culture, thinking about, how can you get people to go forward with this direction? So Ian, I'm curious, I'll turn it over to you, this segment here, why aligning with team goals and KPIs matters. So how do you get that kind of result going forward? What are the benefits of doing so?
Well, I think the benefits are relatively obvious, right? Like if you're in theory, your team's KPIs should sort of nest under the overall business's KPIs, right? What they're endeavoring to hit for the quarter, the year, whatever, should enhance the business overall. So by aligning rewards with those KPIs, you're directly incentivizing your business's performance, right? It seems like blatantly obvious, but we've seen so many times where not only KPIs are not necessarily aligned, but incentive structures don't advance the overall business goals. And I think that's what you're getting down to, right? Is most of us are not working for a charity, right? Our company is here to maximize profits. We as employees are here to help meet that end. But by doing so, we're here for pay, right? And benefits. And, none of us are working for free, so to speak. So if we can align those targets and the reward structures to basically benefit all of us, that's where incentive really comes in. Not to get too philosophical, but I mean that's what capitalism is, right? Is like matching incentive with supply and demand of the marketplace, right? So we have the supply, which is our labor. The company has a demand. How do we incentivize all around to get the best needs? And it is aligning those business goals. Like Rachel mentioned, so often the rewards programs are very static, right? Whether it's tenure or birthdays or even something relatively generic like an employee of the month are rather not subjective. The employee of the month thing can be kind of subjective, but so you've been here for one revolution of the sun, right? Okay, great. How does that help your business goals? So realigning, and I'm not saying it's not important to highlight some of those, but maybe don't put your incentive structure specifically towards, if you've been here 3 years, that's when so-and-so benefit kicks in or whatever. Why not alter that to meet a business outcome, to align with the KPI, and then that employee has an incentive to hit that even earlier, right? And it's more advantageous for everybody than an arbitrary number that, so many days you've been here. So,
well, stay tuned for the next episode, Theory and Practice of Capitalism, subtitle, Debating Milton Friedman. I can't wait. I'm in. I'm ready.
That one's just going to be Anne's monologue.
Yeah.
That was great. I love it.
One of the things that I want to add there, I mean, Anne, you kind of touched on this a little bit, but by aligning your rewards and recognition programs and the measurability of KPIs, it honestly helps managers reduce the chance of bias because you're relying on those measurable standards, right? So, I mean, when it becomes very transparent that these are the key things that we're trying to achieve as a business, and each individual or each team has the responsibility to meet these things in order to achieve reward, I mean, that it becomes so transparent and so clear of this is the action I have to take. And by aligning your rewards with KPIs, it truly reduces some of that emotional ambiguity at work that many employees probably feel when it's not aligned with KPIs and goals. I know this is something that is pretty commonplace, but most employees feel uncertain about whether or not they're meeting expectations, whether that be, the self-doubt. But by aligning your KPIs with your rewards, you have a very clear way to say, I am meeting expectations for both yourself and for a manager to be able to say you are meeting expectations. And this is the reward structure that comes from you meeting those expectations.
That's right. That clarity can drive such performance. And I want to emphasize, Ian, like what you're talking about, obviously this is a for-profit business, or as the economist Thomas Sowell say, there is no for-profit business. It is a business of which the owners derive residual income, which is different, which is a great way of putting it. But what is great is capitalist business can do so many things. It is incredible. And if we are not driving profit, you can't enjoy working for a place that has gone out of business. So we must have performance and goals, and we must drive that. But a big component of that, which every rewards and recognition leader knows, there are other components that are part of your team that are very important. Dignity in their work, good relations among their team, motivation and joy and purpose, and this kind of like, get after it kind of mentality. That's all really important. And a big component of that is how do you reward the people for doing great work so that they can take pride in their work? Because that satisfaction alone is extremely important. I was just listening to a podcast yesterday, the high performance podcast, which I had never heard of before, but I found it and it's amazing. And the guy his name was Zach Brown, and he basically took over the McLaren F1 team and did a big turnaround. And they went from like 6th place to winning 2 championships by basically rallying people around a clear, mission, and then creating great culture, great communications, and great incentives to motivate people and get their energy going. And it wasn't anything other than that. There were some things that he talked about with like swapping engines and stuff like that. But he talked about how creating that team was a huge part of their success. And so doing that through these incentive structures is really, really key. So it's both that profit and that purpose that works together.
That really drives to something a little deeper in it is creating a culture of that expectation of excellence from sort of the managerial side, but also the expectation of like acknowledgement and appreciation from the employee side, right? Culture is one of those, those words that kind of get kicked around a lot, and it can be really difficult to define, and it can be difficult to necessarily describe in a particular environment. But we've all been, in multiple jobs where you see that play out in real life, and especially if it's a sort of negative or low expectation culture, it's immediately apparent, and employees have a tendency to kind of fall right into it, right? Yeah. And that's why I think so much of aligning incentives with KPIs. You brought up a quote, and I had to look it up because I didn't remember the exact wording, but there's something I remembered. Bill Walsh, the old San Francisco 49er coach that led the team back in the 80s and 90s when they were kicking everybody's butt. There's nothing more effective than sincere, accurate praise, and nothing is more lame than a cookie cutter compliment, right? Like, if people by and large want to do well at their jobs, and not only that, they want recognition for doing well at their jobs and want like the incentives to do well at their job. And if you can make that sincere and accurate, if you can, really highlight that, it just benefits everybody all around. And there's no easier way to do that than aligning them with specific goals and KPIs, because then it's not arbitrary, right? Like, then it's automatically, you can objectify it in a way that makes it something the employee strives for, but also easy to recognize and to see. If somebody, if Rachel's just doing a great job for the last month or two and, helping out all over the place, and, it kind of feels like she's doing well, I could say, she's an employee of the month for helping everybody out. But if I don't have specifics behind that, if they don't lead to a specific outcome, it's just kind of subjective. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what makes this not only important, but actually relatively easy to realign, and one of probably the easier ways to change or enhance a company's culture to get a more motivated workforce.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And to just kind of dovetail off of this, KPIs and aligning them with your rewards and recognition, And feedback is to go into one of the things that Simon Sinek speaks to regarding providing feedback and being effective and having an easier go at actually being able to provide feedback is that it's supposed to be timely, it's supposed to be clear, and it's supposed to be very specific and actionable. So when you tie in KPIs and the greater business objectives into how you reward and provide feedback, it almost gives you one of those three things. It gives you the very specific opportunity because you can say, this thing you did, XYZ, tied directly into this other thing that is something we are counting as, a level that you need to be at in order to get this feedback. And it 100% almost does that aspect of providing good feedback for you.
That's right. The one exception to that rule is if you just tell somebody you look nice today. Very general, very cookie cutter, but it's so nice.
My favorite is you're looking sharp today.
Looking sharp. I love that word, actually. I've been using sharp so much lately. So this is kind of an interesting point. Do you see any difference between individual and team-based feedback or individual and team-based recognition or the way that you would align the KPIs? Because, you guys are part of a team, but you have individual responsibilities, individual goals and roles that you have to hit. Do you see any kind of difference of how do you, provide that kind of commentary or something like that based, for a whole team or for an individual? How does that work for you guys?
So from my perspective, individuals and the way you align those with KPIs is your KPIs are going to be more focused on an individual's ownership and accountability of a certain action, right? Mm-hmm. So I know, just speaking candidly internally, I know I'm in charge of helping our website get to a certain conversion rate. I know the metric that I need to hit in order to do that. And I have the ownership and accountability of reaching that goal. Now, from a team-based perspective, you're going to want to ensure that you're aligned with things that are a little bit more related to shared problem solving or collaboration, cross-departmental. So it becomes more of a, how do we take the individual ownership and accountability items and apply them to everybody's individual ownership and accountability items? So where does that collaboration and shared problem solving overlap? And that's really how you can align some of these KPIs with, different levels of the organization.
So my 14-year-old is in 9th grade, and we were just talking about the other day, he had a big group project and he was pissed because him and one other kid in the group essentially did all of the work, and the other three just kind of sat back and collected the good grade. And, so we were kind of laughing and talking about that. And it made me think about, setting clear individual goals really is the only way to be successful at even creating larger team goals, right? By its nature, team goals are generally more abstract, like Rachel said about, collaboration and working together. And then there very well could be a specific that you're driving towards, but just in total, it's going to be a little more abstract than an individual's goals. So it's incumbent upon managers to break down those team goals to the individual level, right? So I don't really see a difference between team and individual goals. They're one has to complete the other. And if every individual isn't hitting their goals, the team doesn't hit its overall one, right? That's what it boils down to. So it's great to be part of a team. It's great to get recognized as a team, but in the end, it really needs to be broken down to the individual level. So not only are the expectations of their performance clear, their understanding of how they fit into things is clear, which is also important. There's, you guys, I've told you before, I used to be in the Army. Something that we talk a lot about in the Army is when at the start of a mission you get your orders, there's a line that's called commander's intent in those orders. Yeah. And if you threw everything else away and kept that one line, that would be enough, because what you're doing is telling your people, this is the problem I'm trying to solve, right? And this is my intent. Now, here, everything else is, here's how I think it should be solved. And those are what the team goals are. But, if you have a different way of achieving those, if you have a better way that I didn't think of or whatever, down to the individual level, as long as I'm giving you my intent and you're meeting that, we can be kind of flexible on how to create those individualistic goals. And I think that unless you do that, unless you break it down to the individual level, there's really no point in having an overall team goal.
I like how you explain that the commander's intent is like, hey, this is what we must achieve as an organization. But that has to filter down into everybody's individual daily lives. And so I was just writing down, I've got clear goals as an organization, but how does that map exactly to each person and what they're doing day to day? That's something that I could be a lot clearer about. It makes me think of that commercial with Kristen Bell where she's like, take care of the pennies and the dollars take care of themselves, that kind of idea. So thinking about like budgeting and stuff like that. So that's helpful. I like that distinction. I want to tie this back to travel. I mean, as we are travel buddies and talking about, travel loyalty and stuff like that on the show, how do you guys connect rewards and recognition programs and aligning them to, key goals in the organization, individual goals? How does that all fit together for y'all?
Let me jump on this one real quick. That several years ago, we historically, Switchfly had been primarily in customer loyalty space, mainly airlines, but other, financial industry and some other areas as well, but mainly on the customer side. About 4-ish years ago now, started doing research into the employee reward side and figuring that in reality, it's very similar, right? That you could think of your employees as your kind of customers, right? And they're buying, quote unquote, their salary with their time and energy. And the salary and benefits are obviously what they're purchasing. And in order to motivate those interactions, that you really need to be able to provide the right incentives. And what we saw when we were looking into employee rewards is it essentially all comes down to gift cards. That's basically it. Those are like, other than a pat on the back and a plaque for working here 25 years, there's really nothing other than, cash bonus or more than likely a gift card. And gift cards are great in very specific instances. It's one thing if like we're standing around doing a stand-up and we play a little game and who gets the question first wins a $5 Starbucks gift card or something. Like, it has its place. But when we're talking about like truly incentivizing employee engagement and hard work and meeting business goals and KPIs, it needs something more than gift cards. And we thought, well, we have a travel platform that you can purchase travel with using loyalty points. Why not with employee rewards, right? And really kind of a similar concept. So that's how we got into it. We ended up signing very quickly the largest employee recognition provider there is, and have been sort of expanding in the space ever since, right? It's really worked out well.
That's awesome. Yeah, Rachel, you've been seeing some research on Adventure at Work, which is a new blog that just released on switchfly.com that kind of makes some of these points and translates it as well. Can you talk a little bit about how you're seeing that connection to innovation?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we kind of mentioned this at the beginning of the podcast, but rewards are becoming a part of performance architecture, not just culture architecture. And, when we think about the idea of innovation, you can always add layers of processes and tighter roadmaps and, aim to have more efficient meetings. But it doesn't necessarily innovation doesn't begin with those things. It begins with curiosity. Mm-hmm. And the thing about travel, and one of the major points to why rewards and recognition platforms are exploring diversification in their offerings with travel, is because travel brings the same energy that fuels breakthrough ideas and problem solving. Because when you're put in a situation, we talked about this before too, when you're put in a situation while traveling that, isn't necessarily the most ideal, you have to get creative to solve those problems while you're traveling from a personal perspective. So travel and exploration of new areas really, it broadens perspectives, but it also stimulates the same parts of our brain that, require, and encourage problem solving and creating new ideas. So, that's one of the things that the blog Adventure at Work kind of dives into. There's some other research that it touches on regarding some neuroscience research from Stanford. I highly encourage you all to read it. We'll include it in the show notes. But that is truly like why travel as an incentive, especially when tied to KPI-aligned rewards, it becomes so successful.
I like that. One could argue that necessity is the mother of innovation, say. It's, you're putting these kind of circumstances backed into a corner, you will be more innovative and resourceful.
Exactly.
And so travel can kind of create that, especially you see in new perspectives and new ways things are done around the world. It's really great. Awesome. Any final thoughts or anything else that listeners should know, especially, folks either thinking about designing new programs or revamping their programs or thinking about how to get rewards and recognition to play nice together toward KPIs, thinking in 2026?
Well, I think just the last maybe point to put a bow on it would be that historically you have your, operations, a managerial team worrying about KPIs and aligning business objectives. And you have your HR team discussing benefits packages, right? And, next year's raises, next year's performance bonuses, whatever. And they're often doing those separately in a bubble. And as a executive team, getting those together and aligning the KPIs with the benefits packages, the performance awards, things like that, is just a really easy way to start that next step of creating a robust employee rewards program. And not only that, right, it saves time, it's easier, it's quicker for the management to tie those things together in their head, and it's easier to communicate that to the employees as well. And I am a big proponent of individual recognition and reward, right? Like, how many times have you been on a team or at a company where your bonus is tied to overall company performance, which I get. Sure, it's great, easy to kind of figure out for the management side, but you could be the best employee of all time and, kill every goal you ever had. But if the rest of the company is not meeting those profitability metrics, you're SOL. And, enough time goes by, somebody like that is going to be looking somewhere else. So those incentives really need to be tied directly to the employee.
Yeah, that's really important. I think it's because it's easy to see, like, okay, what was net income in this quarter, and how do we do, and then just give a distribution based on that. But most people at an organization, I'd say, especially at a larger and larger organization, they want to do a good job in their work. They want to be happy when they show up to work. They want to like their coworkers.
And most people's jobs have nothing to do specifically with revenue, right?
What?
Okay. Most people are working in engineering and human resources and accounting and whatever. They're not directly tied to revenue. So it's a little unfair in some circumstances to put that on them.
And they're not in charge of P&Ls. They can't make any kind of cost-cutting decisions anyway. So,
Yeah, I think that ties directly into one of the takeaways that I would leave the listeners with is make sure that you're tailoring the KPIs and the rewards to the team type. So to Ian, to your point, not everyone is a revenue team. Not everyone's in sales or marketing or RevOps. There are individuals who work in product, who work in HR, who their KPIs should look different. But one of the key things to kind of like loop them all together is make sure that your KPIs are outcome-based, the desired outcome-based, not activity-based. It shouldn't be based on, I sent X amount of emails, that means I hit my threshold. It should be, I improved XYZ. Number of customer issues resolved versus hours spent in the queue. So definitely ensure that the KPIs you're utilizing, one, are tailored, specific, but also take into account, the outcome you're looking for. And, in a lot of cases, that sometimes means you shouldn't reward just what can be measured. Sometimes you just have to reward what matters most, whether that be, mentorship, collaboration, innovation. Not all of these high value behaviors are going to show up in dashboards.
That's a really good point, especially in that sort of mid-tier management level because that manager is being graded on their team's performance, right? And may not always have a specific metric to tie to themselves. But if their team has done XYZ, if they've managed to create an improvement over last year or whatever, it can be a little more arbitrary, but it still should be specific.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. All great points. It's kind of like if you tie bonus to how many accounts did you open up working at a bank? Well, you might just open up a lot more accounts that don't really exist because that's how I'm incentivized, So
right.
There's a great book about that. It's called The Tyranny of Metrics.
Yeah.
Jerry Miller, I think is his name. Anyway, it's a great book talking about you set that incentive, you're going to get that outcome, but that may not be what you actually really want.
Last time we talked about gamification, and remember, whether it's your employees or customers, they're going to be gamifying things as well from their side. So, yeah.
We are all tiny economists. Yes. Well, guys, this is really great.
Should be the title of this episode.
It's a precursor to our next episode on the theory and practice of capitalism, which I'm really excited about.
Perfect. We're all tiny economists.
Well, guys, I always enjoy talking to you, and I love your perspectives, especially rounding into the new year, like I said, of how people are going to be thinking about what does 2026 look like, and how can I get my team more involved on these goals that I have. Travel is a major component of that reports and recognition side of the house. So as always, please go to switchfly.com. You'll see tons more resources there. You can also find us on YouTube and Spotify and all the other channels out there, wherever you like to get your podcasts. And we will see you guys in just a few weeks. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Brandon.
Bye.